started here. Thank you all for joining us today on our last day of our symposium. And thank you for choosing this public health track. We're delighted to be joined today by Christina Campos from the Family Violence Prevention Services. And today she's going to be talking to us about the impact of family and teen dating violence on physical and mental health of young women. We're excited to be joined by her today, and hopefully this will be a really good and engaging session. And with that, I will turn it over to Christina.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me this morning. As Noah said, the topic for this session is impact of family and teen dating violence on the physical and mental health of young women. We want to start off just by acknowledging domestic violence itself is something that impacts all ages, right? So this is men, this is women, this is individuals with other gender identities. For the purpose of this session specifically, we will be focusing on mental health and the physical impact for young women experiencing violence. We want to kind of narrow that focus a bit more. When my executive director, Martha Pelaez, was first approached about this topic and presenting at symposium, there was the suggestion to kind of focus in very specifically on young women of color, and specifically Hispanic and African American women of color teens. So that's kind of the approach that we take today. We are going to kind of look at some general facts overall, and then kind of narrow in that focus as we proceed. A few housekeeping issues just to address as we get started. Lots of different people, lots of different preferred terminology. So we definitely acknowledge that when it comes to how people choose to identify their racial or ethnic identity, specifically around labels that we use for ourselves. So we acknowledge that, we honor that, and we also do just reference. For this session specifically, we're going to be looking at the terminology used within the scholarly articles that are referenced within the material here. So for that purpose, we are primarily going to be using terms around Hispanic and African American or Black when we speak about the young women that took place in some of the studies referenced. Additionally, we are going to be looking at not just the articles and the information gleaned from that, but also some commonly referred sources for some of the statistics that we're going to share. That would be from the CDC, from Love is Respect. And in terms of research, we just recognize in general, we have 40 to 50 years of research on domestic violence in general. So we do want to acknowledge that when it comes to teen dating violence, there's there's generally less information and data, especially when it comes to longitudinal studies, especially when you narrow down that focus to look at young women and teens of color. So we were very intentional in the type of articles that we wanted to include, looking definitely at articles that were very responsible in how they kind of gathered input and data, really highlighting and focusing and giving space for the voice of young women, and specifically young women of color, and just kind of how they honored those voices in the material that was presented. So with that, we are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome again to the second day of the symposium, the sixth day of Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Because of the fact that we are in domestic violence awareness, I would like to start by sharing a list. Joanna Sierra, 17, of Dallas. Sarah, 19, of England. Rita Syed, 18, of Friendswood. Diamond Alvarez, 16, of Houston. Kiera Blackshear, 16, of Houston. Caitlin Stone, 16, of Beaumont. Estrella Moreno, 19, of Midland. Megan Madison Leach, of Roman Forest. Vanessa Villarreal, 19, Bovina. Caitlin Brandon, 18, of Cold Spring. Desiree Cavazos, 19, of Laredo. Casey Wofford, 19, of Wichita Falls. And finally, Serenity Janae Flores, 13, of Amarillo. The names that I just read are names of teens who lost their lives specifically to teen dating violence here in Texas in 2022. These individuals who lost their life by a boyfriend in a teen dating violence relationship, these individuals were shot and killed by their boyfriends. None of these young women had made it to their 20s. The majority of these young women were not even out of high school. The youngest victim was 13. And so while today we're here to talk about the impact of family violence and teen dating violence, how this impacts physical and mental health, we want to kind of center this conversation around the fact that so many teens in the state of Texas and across the country are losing their life to domestic violence and teen dating violence. And so kind of centering and framing that within our conversation gives us the opportunity to move forward very intentionally as we consider today being part of the audience, right? And being part of this dialogue, this conversation around teen dating and family violence. What are we each doing, both in the personal sense of responsibility and accountability for people experiencing violence, teens and young women, but also in the bounds of where we work, why we're here, whatever organization or institution that we're a part of. How are we going to come away from this session, not only taking time to really reflect and contemplate this epidemic of family and teen dating violence, but also move forward with a very intentional effort on creating change, right? So that the names of the individuals we just read, who are only some of the young ladies who lost their life to teen dating violence, how can we honor them and their memory by moving forward in an intentional way to create change, right? Opportunities for education and prevention to break the cycle of violence. So with that, we're going to go ahead and go to our first slide, please. So we're going to start just with some general definitions. This should be familiar, hopefully, to most people attending the session today. So domestic violence, in the DV world, we kind of use this general term, the intentional pattern of behavior that one uses to gain or maintain power and control over a person that they are in a relationship with or they were previously in a relationship with, characterized by force of control, may include physical, psychological, sexual, or financial abuse. And oftentimes what we see is that this domestic violence is generational in nature. This differs a bit from Texas Family Code. So when we look at kind of like law enforcement, the judicial system, child welfare, where they approach domestic violence from, you know, the slightly different angle of an act perpetrated by one member of a household against another that's meant to cause bodily injury, assault, or physical harm, or a threat that puts a person in fear of that intentional physical harm. So the positives to Texas Family Code is that it does really identify the broader range, right? This isn't just intimate partner violence. This can exist between any member of a household, this intentional behavior perpetrated on another. Whereas with our domestic violence definition, it moves beyond just that idea around physical violence or injury to really encompass the coercive control and all of the ways that that can kind of be perceived. So next slide, please. Hopefully this power and control wheel will be familiar to people as well. Again, this is looking at how power and coercive control are really at the basis for a lot of the intentional decisions made by someone who is choosing violence against another person. A lot of these things, the intimidation, the emotional abuse, the isolation, things that are very intentional in nature, but not always evident to the outside. We reference this first just to kind of center in again on the fact that a lot of abuse, before it ever becomes physical or sexual in nature, before it's something that may be brought to the attention of law enforcement, of child welfare, of friends and family even, right? This is something that is existing and kind of breeding in ways that may not be apparent, especially if you're not looking for it, or if some of these behaviors have been so normalized, either for us personally or just kind of diffused without, throughout society in general. Next slide, please. We're going to shift gears a bit here and look at our definition for teen dating violence. So similar to domestic violence, but again, focused on adolescent. So characterized by some form of physical violence, sexual violence, psychological aggression, and or stalking perpetrated by an adolescent against another adolescent in a dating relationship. Next slide. Again, we do have this graphic to kind of reference what this can look like for an adolescent experiencing teen dating violence. The teen power and control wheel is similar for that of the adults. It has the anger and emotional abuse. It references intimidation, minimizing, denying, blaming, threats. But it does have some characteristics here that are a bit different compared to the adult power and control wheel. So just checking in with Noah real quick about this screen. Not able to see the graphic right now. If we could just revert back to the last slide just briefly.
Give me 1 second. Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. And thank you to Noah for assisting today. I don't have a dual screen where I'm located currently, and so just being able to keep eyes on the presentation as well as the room. So I appreciate his support. One of the things once we get that slide back up, teen power and control is slightly different. Some of the pieces of that puzzle that look different from the adult wheel are going to be around peer pressure, obviously something very prevalent for adolescents, for preteens, teens, young adults, as well as using social status. Those are definitely two areas where individuals experiencing violence, face unique challenges compared to adults. And then we're ready to go on to the next slide with the statistics, please.
Is that not it?
Yeah, just back towards the statistics real quickly.
I think so. This is the next slide that comes up. I don't know.
A second ago, it was there, like when you were, right there.
Okay,
Perfect.
there we go.
Thank you so much. Okay. So statistics. We want to just recognize that 1 in 3 teens in the United States will experience physical, sexual, or emotional abuse from someone they're in a relationship with. Not sure why the whole part isn't showing, but we should have some other statistics that kind of pop up on the side there as well. Awesome, thank you. So again, 1 in 3 teens before they turn 18 years old, right, have already experienced some form of teen dating violence. That number is inclusive of both males and females. Then we look at 1.5 million high school students nationwide experiencing physical abuse specifically from a partner every year. 25% of female high schoolers who have been sexually abused by a dating partner. And then referencing just the fact that for teens, homicide is the 3rd leading cause of death in this country. On a similar note, 50% of adolescents who experience rape or sexual abuse will attempt suicide and try to take their own life as a result of that experience. And then finally, females between the age of 16 and 24 being 3 times more likely than the rest of the population to be abused by a partner. So it's easy to see statistics flash. It's easy to kind of see that banner that runs across like a newsreel, but to really kind of stop and soak that in and just look at those numbers and what it represents. I would encourage everybody in the session today just to consider an adolescent that you know in your life, right? Maybe this is your own child. Maybe this is a niece, a nephew, a godchild, a friend, a child of a friend, right? Or children, right? Because our children grow into adolescence and nobody stops to think, right, when you have a baby, what is this child going to experience as they grow? Even if I work very hard to maintain a healthy and stable household, what's going to happen as they kind of go out into the world during adolescence and the type of people they will be interacting with, the type of experience those children have had, right? And so being mindful that these statistics affect all of the youth in our own families, our homes, our communities, and our country. Next slide, please. So it would be remiss in this conversation to discuss kind of these statistics and general definitions without also looking at the role that power, privilege, and equity play within this conversation. Structural and societal inequality and oppression have to be considered alongside of gender when we look at the impact to female adolescents. And this is very specific as it pertains to racism, socioeconomic status, class, and sexual orientation. So again, refocusing not just on the general population, but what does this mean for our female teens of color? We know that teens in general are disproportionately impacted by violence. They're at a greater risk for experiencing teen dating violence. We know that systematic and institutional structures of inequality aren't always considered when we read or look at the research around teen dating violence. There's a lot of emphasis placed on individual factors and indicators for violence, but looking at the bigger picture and bringing in the information regarding the other areas of discrimination and oppression that exist alongside that gender violence cannot be ignored. We also just need to kind of center sociocultural background is also less likely to be considered. So we have a very specific idea in America, especially middle class or white America, around what violence looks like. And that's predominantly what we've been heard. That's what we've seen in studies. But when we look at different cultures, the different ways that violence is defined or perceived, and also the ways that people are taught to not just recognize violence, but interface with it, how they share or don't share about it is really specific. So even within the studies that we do have, how much has this been considered and how are we able to take into account the lack of reporting that may exist because of different terms, different semantics, as we have a conversation about violence. Next slide, please. So this is where we're going to kind of narrow that focus in. teen dating violence as it relates to Hispanic and African American female adolescents. Next slide. So for the cultural and contextual factors associated with teen dating violence within the Hispanic population, we want to recognize acculturation and specifically the stress that some teens experience as they are kind of forging their own path in the country as a first or second generation American, taking the tradition and culture that may exist with parents and grandparents in a home and trying to kind of marry that to what they experience in their school and their community, and finding where do they fit into this process. For some people, this causes a lot of stress. And so we're going to look at the impact that that stress can have on young teens, specifically Hispanic teens, and those experiencing violence. We're also going to examine ethnic pride and the role that this can play, positive or negative, as it comes to the risk for experiencing family or teen dating violence. The emphasis on loyal to family, and again, the pros and cons that can exist around that for some families, and then traditional gender roles as they are seen throughout the information provided by some of these studies specific to Hispanic populations. Next slide, please. So, Hispanic teens showing greater evidence of acculturation are also shown to show greater risk for experiencing teen dating violence. Another just disclaimer, with most of these studies, because there is newer or emerging data and less years of study in general overall, we recognize that there's correlations between some of these factors. So in this case, the acculturation and then experiencing dating violence. We also recognize that we're still kind of piecing together how much of this is causal, right? So impacting and creating this connection, and how much of it may be intersectional. We're going to try to kind of keep that in mind as we move forward. So one of the things that we do see when it comes to that acculturation, female adolescents who report more stress due to acculturation also reported seeing teen dating violence as more acceptable. This included accepting or excusing violent behaviors from partners. Many times teens referenced back to the fact that this was normal and something they also experienced or observed in their households. We also look at the fact that male adolescents from Hispanic households reported that they were more likely to perpetrate violent behavior on a partner or be able to describe instances where that took place. Next slide, please. We see that Hispanic teens who reported experiencing harsh parenting styles, which could be categorized as a focus on punishment or discipline that involved some type of physical discipline or punishment. When teens experience that between the ages of 10 and 12, they were also more likely to go on and experience teen dating violence in relationships later on in adolescence. We also see from some of these studies, both male and female adolescents from families that's strongly associated with the idea of machismo would connect ideas around virility and bravado, specifically back with men. And also see men as the ones who were the authority, the ones to make decisions in the household as well as within relationships. Male and female adolescents also both identified women as needing to be very modest, very submissive in their behaviors, their words, their actions, and as being responsible for caretaking, not just around children, but just kind of the household in general, including adult relatives, parents, grandparents. We see adolescent girls who report a strong emphasis on machismo within their family or homes were also more likely to accept violence in relationships and be part of teen dating violence relationships. Next slide, please. So we're going to shift slightly here to the cultural and contextual factors associated with teen dating violence in the African American population and community. Again, with this reference towards adolescence, we see a prevalence of family violence as one of the factors, which is going to be a greater indicator of some type of exposure or experience with teen dating violence. We see multi-level discrimination as a factor disproportionately impacting African American youth. And then this superwoman concept, which we'll kind of break down and discuss. Next slide, please. So out of all racial groups, in studies just across the board, we see that African American female adolescents report the highest rates of teen dating violence and sexual coercion. We see that African American adolescents are more likely to experience exposure to family violence in childhood, specifically physical or sexual abuse. We have seen race and class and gender-based discrimination experienced by African American adolescents at a higher rate than we see within other racial and ethnic groups, leading to lower self-esteem, internalization of poor self-image, risky sexual behavior, and increased rates of teen dating violence. We also see for African American females specifically, physical and emotional abuse as adolescents is often very closely related or correlated with unprotected sex and unplanned pregnancies. Next slide, please. So something that came up across two different articles that I referenced was this term superwoman. And it relates to a coping skill adopted by some African American women as a way to deal with oppression. So again, coping skills, right, they can be healthy, they can be unhealthy. There's many different coping skills we adopt. And the good thing in this sense for superwomen, right, is it's an active step towards recognizing oppression and trying to protect against it or deal with it in one's life. Characteristics include the effort to suppress fear and weakness, determination to show strength and resist vulnerability, desire to be independent, and the tendency to put others before one's self. So on the whole, while these may be skills that help one adapt to kind of the oppression being experienced, we also see that there can be some drawbacks to this. African American females report, when they feel the need to have the superwoman role, take this on during adolescence, they're also at increased risk for experiencing teen dating violence. Next slide, please. So embodying that identity of a superwoman may make adolescents less likely to seek assistance for family and teen dating violence. So back to that need to kind of handle things independently, not look weak, not ask for help. We see that it may make adolescents less likely to see a therapist or utilize support systems. Again, we're going to kind of reference as we move forward. But the fact that African American female youth are less likely to be believed or be heard can definitely discourage from accessing support systems that youth, adolescents from other ethnic groups may have more access or ability to participate with. We see that it can also result in negative physical and psychological outcomes. So obesity, heart disease, high rates of depression and anxiety, general psychological distress, all things that come from trying to kind of hold these feelings and emotions in and manage and feel the need to kind of go this path independently. Next slide, please. Some other considerations brought forth within these studies just reference again African American females historically being considered by society to be hypersexualized and angry was consistent across age groups. So even within children and adolescents, leading to them being less likely to be believed or offer support when they reach out for help. We also see how racism and classism and sexism within law enforcement and the criminal justice system have discouraged disclosure of teen dating violence by African American adolescents. And this is twofold. On the one hand, again, am I going to be believed? I've reached out for help before and I was kind of ignored or brushed aside. But at the same time, of guilt that was reported by young women in the African American community who were afraid to report that, their partner was choosing violence and perpetrating violence against them for fear of, again, that disproportionate response by law enforcement and criminal justice. Is this person going to be physically harmed? Are they going to be served harsher penalties or sentences than somebody else who may be experiencing violence, right? Is this something that is going to intersect with incarceration or interrupt their opportunity to kind of finish school, make a living, move forward in life? Next slide, please. So we do want to look at how can we support teens experiencing violence, and specifically our young women, and specifically those young women of color. CDC has kind of brought forward some key strategies, not only to prevent teen dating violence, right, but just overall, how are we intervening and breaking these cycles? So building adolescent self-esteem and teaching skills needed to create and maintain healthy relationships was really key. Education, prevention, and intervention needs to take place on multiple levels. We see kind of that individual level where we're looking at, a young person's attitudes or beliefs around violence, considering what they've been exposed to throughout childhood, considering what they've consumed around them as they've grown. We look at their relationship with peers and families and the roles that caregivers and parents can play in this. We look at our community, the cultural norms that exist, what our youth see when they turn on the TV, what they hear as they listen to music, how they consume social media, and the cultural norms around teen dating and family violence that are perpetuated on those platforms. We also look at societal factors. So policy and law, systems and institutions, many of which, were created and founded on very gendered systems, right? And kind of have these historical impact that disproportionately not only doesn't favor victims of violence or youth, but again, specifically beyond age, beyond gender, looking at the racism and the classism that are implicit within many of these systems. Slide, please. So a few different suggestions or approaches, offering adolescents and their families the opportunity to learn about family and teen dating violence, encouraging parents from a young age to have conversations with children around healthy friendships, around healthy relationships, practicing and modeling in the home by parents and caregivers about what communication and boundaries look like, around equity within relationships, and finding partnership that is mutually beneficial for both parties, regardless of gender. We look at the need to engage schools, adopt policies and practices that can create safe and supportive environments for all children, and specifically children and youth and adolescents of color. And again, to that next level, are females, right? We want to connect adolescents in the community to resources and physical and mental health services. So beyond the classroom learning, how are we taking the opportunity to have social workers and family engagement specialists in schools who can uh, fill that role of identifying some of these children that are at risk, these adolescents, and connecting them outside. And then finally, building really strong bonds between staff and students, taking the time to develop and nurture these relationships. That a teen coming to school isn't just a number on a checklist to be signed in that they had attendance today, but getting to know. So there's kind of an indication if something's off, if something may be going on at home, if somebody is expressing concern or distress around a relationship that they're in. We also need to look at how our community organizations and faith-based organizations can intentionally and actively create teen mentoring programs, leadership programs, opportunities for our youth to get engaged outside of just school and home, but really connect with people in the community that look like them, that have come from their neighborhoods, that are able to show them what healthy relationships look like, to model, again, the communication and the boundaries that can exist, so that we're able to kind of break some of the stigma, or denormalize some of the learned behaviors and actions that may have been observed in households growing up. I also want to work within systems to provide safe neighborhoods and communities. And this can be definitely at a local level. How are we getting involved? How are we connecting household to household into the community, in places where people congregate, and really trying to build opportunities for safety and togetherness. And then finally, seeking out and implementing effective social and economic policies that reduce violence. And so this is really going to go, again, from the state to, or excuse me, the local to the state to the national level. What are we doing to really analyze what is effective, what is working, how can we create systems where families are not overly stressed, where people have an opportunity to work and work for a living wage rather than working 3 and 4 jobs, for situations where parents can find affordable childcare, taking off some of these stressors, resources for people who may be experiencing mental health issues, substance use disorders. So how are we investing intentionally in social and economic policies that are going to, on the back end, reduce violence overall, but specifically the stressors on families that are kind of breeding this generational violence that we see being perpetrated as family violence, into bullying, and then on into teen dating violence, and then those adolescents becoming adults themselves, and the cycle continues. Next slide, please. So recentering again, because these are pretty broad recommendations and responses. How do we look at Hispanic and African American adolescents, specifically females, who are experiencing violence, and how do we show up intentionally to support them? Next slide. One thing that we can do is celebrate culture. Knowing who you are is something that was shown across studies to be very central to building positive self-esteem. And it's not just knowing who you are on an individual basis around, these are my strengths and here's what I'm good at, and something that one likes about themselves, but taking it that next level, being to identify who you are within the context of family and culture was very, very important. Being able to relate in a positive way to ethnic pride, was shown to be an amazing protective factor. So having that sense of self results in increased self-esteem, and then leading to less risk for teen dating violence. That positive racial identity also correlates directly with less risky sexual behavior and substance use for female adolescents, specifically in minority populations. Next slide, please. So I can't even go another slide without acknowledging. I'm sorry, I don't know kind of the configuration and how kind of I think some of the margins may have shifted. So I apologize if it's a little bit difficult to read. Wasn't the way it was this morning, my apologies. But definitely just, yeah, encouraging culturally specific protective factors is something that's going to be very, very relevant for our adolescents. One example of this would be the Hispanic trait of placing emphasis on family and maintaining cohesive family units, right? So when families are able to spend time together in positive activity, when they are able to eat together, when they're able to play together, when they're able to work together, they're more able to maintain a cohesive family unit. And that just leads to better communication overall, less conflict in the home, more opportunity for parents and caregivers to monitor their children and adolescents, to be aware of the behaviors and really provide for safety. So again, back to those societal and kind of bigger picture interventions. What are we doing to make sure that households, specifically minority households, are supported in a way, right, where they're not disproportionately affected and struggle to be able to simply have time to spend as a family and focus on that cohesion? We know that this is going to provide better outcomes for our adolescents, less risk of family and teen dating violence. Next slide, please. So another term that was referenced, and again, specifically back to minority populations, educating adolescents around critical consciousness. So the ability to critically reflect and act on the root causes of social conditions. So this is going to be the opportunity for youth and adolescents, and specifically females, to recognize I am not a result of my environment or the way other people view me or treat me. I am my own person. And teaching our youth the ability to think for themselves, to actively challenge, to question, to engage in conversation and dialogue around the things that they experience, some of these adverse social circumstances, right? We want them to question, and we want them to have space to and be empowered to kind of write their own stories. Recognizing critical consciousness is a great avenue to that. So this is going to help adolescents challenge and resist some of these processes that have been imposed on them through society, through culture. And in turn, this is going to not only increase their mental and physical health, right, but have them less likely to be engaging or experiencing teen dating violence in a relationship. Next slide, please. So at Family Violence Prevention Services, we recognize violence across the spectrum. We've got services for people who choose violence, our batterers intervention, the counseling, parenting specifically for men who have battered their partners. We look at engaging survivors of violence at our battered women's and children shelter, excuse me, but also throughout our non-residential services. So the counseling, the group therapy, the classes that help people understand at a psychoeducational level about violence itself or about how violence can impact parenting, giving people the tools and the resiliency and the resources to make a change for themselves and to make positive impact towards breaking or interrupting that cycle before their children experience it and carry that on. The legal resources, the military and judicial support. There's just so many avenues. One thing that is new to family violence and is very specific to kind of the content matter of this presentation is our Youth Advisory Council. So this council is about 2.5 years old. The brainchild of our executive director, Martha Pelias. She wanted something very specific in addition to all the resources and support provided that would provide education, that would be a prevention effort, specifically in response to the lack of comprehensive domestic violence and teen dating violence education in schools here in Texas. This is something where the mission is to engage in purposeful dialogue, to address and educate other youth in the prevention of teen violence that affects their lives. The vision statement, to arrive at respectful and healthy relationships that contribute to the overall wellness and enjoyment of life as a young person. So our Youth Advisory Council is kind of born and based in this. Through Youth Council, we meet generally once a month with a collection of students. Initially, Youth Council was open to teens in high school. After about a year or so, what we recognized is if we're just engaging people at the high school level, we've missed the mark, right? So opening this opportunity to preteens and teens in middle school, adolescents, as they are first kind of transitioning from those friendships and relationships where they may experience bullying, right? Which is in itself a very complicated and an important topic to discuss, and also can kind of be a byproduct of exposure to violence in the home. But specifically around teen dating violence, right? Middle school is where you see kids who are dating. The most recent statistic, 73% of 13-year-olds are in a dating relationship. As the mother of a 13-year-old, it's a scary thought. Mother of an 11-year-old as well, who is, in his terms, dating a friend at school, right? So recognizing that this is something that children are kind of entering into during adolescence, during those middle school years, on up into high school. And then again, as they are kind of leaving high school and entering into the world, into young adulthood, whether that be college or entering the workforce, that's something that this council looks to address. Not sure if we can pull this slide back up, Noah. Thank you. And so, yes, we want to have this place, this opportunity for youth to convene, to dialogue around different forms of violence that may have impacted them or people that they know. This can be family violence. This can be teen dating violence. Meet once a month to kind of learn and reflect. We utilize the Dating Matters curriculum, which is an evidence-based curriculum provided by the CDC. We also implement several different educational aids and tools through our program guide and toolkit that are meant to kind of help create conversation and dialogue with youth around domestic and teen dating violence. And then we go out into the community, we interact, we participate, we create conversations in spaces around San Antonio and even beyond. I'll share a bit about that in a few minutes. So next slide, please. So research shows that directly engaging teens in preventing violence helps them in many different ways. Teens that are actively involved in something like Youth Advisory Council tend to make healthier choices. They learn to feel empowered that their voice matters. They're given opportunities to advocate for change in their schools, in their communities. They can bring this message back even into their families. And again, kind of disrupt that pattern of violence if it's something that they've been exposed to. They also have opportunities to dialogue with adults regarding resources and solutions. So one of the things our youth council members have been able to do the last 2 Februaries was go up to Austin. They participated in just kind of a general tour and meetings with several legislators back in 2021 or 2022. And then in 2023, this year, they were able to participate in Capitol Day and go. They sat down with the legislators. They were able to actually work on reworking a bill that failed to pass in the last legislative session, but working together at a table to see 5 teenagers meeting, right, with representatives and senators to say, hey, can we change this wording, or here's why this is important? How can we have more support for teens experiencing dating violence and sexual assault on campus? What kind of resources would we like to see on our campuses? So having that first person engagement, right, with adults in positions of power can be very, very empowering. Unfortunately, the bill that they worked on did not pass, didn't even make it to the floor. But the idea is to let them know this is something that's available to you. You will be voting soon, if not already. And when that time comes, right, your voice matters. What you choose to do with your voice, what you choose to do as you move forward from adolescence into adulthood to create change, right? That is something that's within your grasp. We also see that participating in something like youth council can promote respect and empathy for others, both in how our youth treat others, but the expectations they have for how people treat them. This is where recognizing those red flags come into play. This is where they're able to use their words and communicate in order to really set their boundaries and enforce them. And then reach out for help if they experience something that's violating those boundaries. To be more specific in terms with youth of color who are experiencing domestic violence, our Youth Advisory Council commits to celebrating the diversity of all of our council members, recognizing and making sure that when they come to a council meeting, they're seeing positive male role models that look like them. Say male role models, female role models. Any of our staff or volunteers or interns engaged in this program, are a direct reflection of the diversity of the members that we have. We also have staff who are trauma informed. We have people that are culturally sensitive, right? And so when we have our council members come into this space, they can feel welcome, they can feel safe. We encourage members to bring their own unique perspectives. We recognize they have different backgrounds and experiences, different levels of knowledge or engagement with family or teen dating violence. And we really encourage this internal dialogue. Something that's huge and that we're discussing now is creating spaces for youth to come and storytell, to share, opportunities for adults who serve and work with youth to have listening sessions, right? So less about what we think we know and what statistics say and what we can do for them, but creating space and empowering them to explore what will be helpful and beneficial for them and their peers, and how can they be responsible for sharing the ideas back into their homes, back into their schools, back into their communities, thereby empowering them. And then just finally, recognizing again, just this opportunity for engagement and the connection back to resources and supports for people that they may know who are experiencing violence, or right, if this is something that they have been impacted by personally. Next slide, please. So these are some pictures of some of our council members. They have the opportunity to partake in media. Even as recently as last night, we had a council meeting where they were preparing a booth for our Purple Run, our 5K walk and run against domestic violence tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, out at Our Lady of the Lake University. Our youth have created a large-scale art piece depicting the teen power and control wheel in a very real and visual way through masks that kind of embody the emotions and feelings by someone experiencing the different topics that each spoke of that teen power and control wheel describe. They work to also kind of create some posters and some infographics that are going to be on display. And so we had the opportunity for media to come out and kind of hear them and learn from them about what they're doing and how they hope that that will impact change in the community. We have youth who have participated in town hall meetings and interviews, both in English and in Spanish, around Domestic Violence Awareness Month, teen dating violence, and youth council in general. We've had opportunities, like I mentioned, to go up to the Capitol and meet with lawmakers, and also to meet with our colleagues and our supporters at Texas Council on Family Violence, who have so graciously toured them, gotten them kind of backstage, right? And an inside view, and really breaking down what it takes to impact policy at a larger level. We have gone to Killeen, where we were able to participate in a meeting of youth councils from across the state of Texas. We had the distinction of being the only youth council with a focus on domestic violence, and then a platform there to share with hundreds of other youth from around the state what teen dating violence is, what family violence is, and what are resources and supports. How can you stay safe? What are the red flags? How can you tell a healthy from an unhealthy relationship, right? Amazing opportunities just, again, to dialogue with youth around the state, but then also locally back home. As I mentioned, going out to our Purple Run tomorrow. This Tuesday, they were out at Roosevelt High School, tabling and kind of sharing information at a community neighborhood event. We've also been at Juneteenth Festival, again, looking for ways to kind of interact in various subsets of our community and reaching all segments of our population. They do volunteer activities within our agency. So getting able to kind of come out to the shelter, support monthly birthday parties, be part of holiday festivities, sorting gifts and giving gifts to kids who may not otherwise have very festive holiday seasons. Just overall, getting a really hands-on approach to what domestic and family and teen dating violence can look like in the community, and how they can be part of actively addressing that directly with the people affected. You see some of the pictures here of our meetings where they were in one of these actually kind of creating some of the artwork that will be displayed tomorrow at Purple Run. And then team building, right? Also just time to kind of learn, not just learn together, but have fun together and really build relationships and bonds. It's been a joy over the last 2.5 years to see some of our members who started as high school seniors grow into college students who are providing this peer support back down to their high school and middle school counterparts. So it's an amazing initiative. And again, just highlighting one thing that our agency does, but really encouraging everyone who's in attendance today, whatever segment you work in within, be that social work, law enforcement, if it's the criminal justice system, if it's counseling, if it is advocacy, and beyond, right? Public policy, healthcare, education, any segment of society, where are we creating opportunities like this to actively engage our youth, right? And if that's not something that we're in a position to do, how are we encouraging the youth in our life and that we come into contact with? How are we educating them that something like youth council exists, and connecting them to activities and programs where they can connect with other youth, right, in the community, working towards positive change. So a bit about our youth council. And next slide, please. That does conclude our presentation. Any questions or comments? Definitely happy to take those now. My contact information is on the screen as well. If anybody has questions regarding council, any of the information presented, or any of our agency services overall.
Yes, folks, and go ahead and please type your questions into the chat. We can take, and I can sort of facilitate those as well. Christina, we have a question from Carol in the chat. She's asking, are there any programs in place that attend health fairs at schools or community events that are specifically targeting this young group of children?
Yes, so we have tried very diligently to reach out to school administration across different school districts throughout San Antonio, providing our information. Very frequently, our agency will go present, whether that be to administrators or to students, around just information, education, or be present on campus for an event. But what we would really like to see is opportunities for our youth council. So we would love to be invited out. We've had a few opportunities, but we want our youth there to have this dialogue with other youth and really feel empowered to connect with them and bring back this message. So we've done it in a few high schools. I did mention just this past Tuesday out at Roosevelt. We've been out to some of our private schools within the city. Some of our Catholic schools have reached out. Jubilee has reached out. Some of our North Side schools have offered the opportunity to kind of come and present. But we'd really like, as this initiative grows and as more people are aware of us, to be more prevalent in the community and to have these children, our youth, our adolescents participate.
One more question. Would the YAC be able to come out during the school day? I work at a high school. This is from Stephanie.
Yeah, so what happens is when we get a request, and it is, because we have students, if this isn't during school hours, we will first pass that over to our college participants, college age participants. They tend to have a little more flexibility with their time during the day. And so we have had opportunities. One of our college members actually presented to Family Violence Prevention's Board of Directors just last Friday during the afternoon lunch hour. So we do have opportunities in that regard. If for some reason a student is not available to participate, myself and some of our program staff are also able to come out and provide information, again, be it presentations directly to youth or providing presentations, resources, support for teachers, counselors, admin on staff, even parents. We would love to come in the evening for a session where parents and children kind of come together around these topics.
And then one last question from Martha here in the chat. She's asking if you all have been to Edgewood ISD.
We have not been to Edgewood ISD. We would love to have an invite. If anybody in this audience today has any connections within school districts or any other, organizations where youth kind of congregate, we are happy to come out. And if you go on to feps.org, you can, of course, email me directly. But if you go onto our website, there's opportunities for like speaker requests. If you put in your information, if you mention that this is something specific for youth council, that will come back to us, and we will make sure that, again, either our staff come out or our youth, or a combination, to provide support for any type of event or presentation.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us for this session, and thank you, Christina, for presenting to us today. As a reminder, we are going to return back to the main stage here at 9:45 for our presentation from the Texas Council on Family Violence. So thank you all so much, and we'll see you all in the next session.
Thank you, and thank you, Noah.